Welcome to the Winglang update. Name to be decided. Forget everything you know about programming language for the cloud. Now, welcome your host, Eyal Keren.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for the Winglang update. It's our 9th show. It's a lot.
Very impressive, Eyal. Very impressive.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to do every 2 weeks. And actually, we have I think this show is it's the number one show with guest appearances. We have you, Revital, of course, and we're gonna talk with Raphael, and you're gonna mention this in a couple of minutes, and then we're gonna have, of course, our one and only Mark, the DJ, which will give us some music, and then we're gonna have Uri that will show us the Hummus website. He's going to show us some code with two new resources, the secret and the website resource. And then we're going to end with Massimo. Basically, we're going to have with Elad with a chat with Massimo from AWS, and that's what we're going to have today in the show.
Wow.
And thanks for all the people who's appearing, and that's awesome. So
amazing.
Yeah. So before I was expecting applause. So thank you for all the people. Great. So to tell us, nice. So tell us about. Okay, so come down and tell us a little bit about Raphael. Why are we having Raphael today?
Oh my goodness, Raphael. Okay, so Raphael is an awesome contributor. And
a wingnut, a genuine wingnut.
A genuine wingnut, and he's really active. Through Slack, through issues, GitHub issues. He's contributing a lot to our code. He did tremendous contribution, very significant one. And he recently joined our hackathon. Also known as Wingathon.
The Wingathon.
Wingathon.
The first Wingathon.
The first Wingathon.
And what did we do there? What was the idea behind it?
So the idea, it was not like a typical fancy hackathon project. It was very, very modern, modest Wingathon, where the goal was to use Wing and only Wing as the programming language, and for us to see what pieces are missing when we go and build real applications that are deployable through the cloud.
Right. So in a discussion 2 weeks ago with Eric Johnson, Elad and I were mentioning that we were zeroing down on the scope. We're not adding new stuff. And one of the things that we want to do is we're trying to make sure that basically you can write real projects, real world application, and basically to surface all the unknowns. Because there's things that we know that are missing and the things that we don't know that are missing. And the Wingathon was basically a tool. And of course, you took your kind of magic community capabilities and kind of harness the power of your community for this to basically create projects that will allow us to actually see what's working well, what's not working well, what's missing. And one of the amazing projects was Raphael's. I think it was one of the winners. Was he the only winner? There was two winners.
It was the only winner of this Wingathon.
Okay.
So great job, Raphael. Oh yes. In addition to Raphael, several community folks also joined us. Finn joined us. EJ joined us. Marcio started in the beginning, but he was always there listening and providing some feedback.
Right.
So thank you all. It was awesome.
Yeah. It was great projects, and you're going to hear about those projects a lot. We're going to do some noise about those projects.
We will, and we will definitely need to find a way to showcase them.
Awesome. So without further ado, we're gonna jump on this thing right now. I'm gonna put this on here. I think, right? Yep.
Yes.
And I'm gonna set up this thing.
And we're going to start chatting with Raphael.
Right. So.
Hello.
Hey. So just making sure, can we hear Raphael? Great, we can hear you. How you doing, man?
Good, and you?
Good. You know, I'm getting used to see you often.
Well, thank you for joining
That's
us,
nice.
and thank you for this. I mean, it's for me, it's so interesting to see people. I'm not familiar with. It is my first involvement in an open source project, and seeing how people. I mean, seeing this passion and seeing people coming and investing this time, and I understand exactly the reasons. I think I understand this project is for me. It's exciting for me, but I've never seen this happen. So thank you for showing me this. It's such a learning experience for me.
Yes, for me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Actually, it's quite fun to contribute and work with you guys together and have those chat in Slack about technical or non-technical stuff. It's always fun.
yes, I agree. So Raphael, you're here because we want to see your Wingathon winning project. But before that, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Raphael. I'm an IT consultant from Germany. I'm developing cloud applications for about 5 years now, I think. Most of the time professional work, but also some side project as well. And I'm deeply doing this stuff in AWS. So all these resources we already have in Wing, most of them already use them in some project or at least try them out. So Wing was a natural fit for me. Actually, also Terraform and CDK, we use it in everyday our project. So that was quite nice. The first time I actually heard about Wing was quite before reInvent 2022, and it was first time for me. Was in Las Vegas actually at reInvent. So I also saw the tweet of Matthew Bonning. He was offering some live demos, but unfortunately I didn't get a meeting with him there because too many things are happening there all the time. So after Christmas and stuff like that, when I had some free time, I thought, okay, let's give it another try. And I started checking out the project. I was looking at documentation, the examples, and it was quite easy to start with that. And was amazed by this cool console popping up when you run Wing It and your application, your architecture. And I think it's a great way to see what you're building while you're building it.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was actually so my starting point for Wing. Then I thought, okay, now you know what it does. Let's dig deeper and try to contribute a little bit. And I looked at the code and saw, okay, Terraform, CK, Terraform. I know the stuff a little bit. And then the issue was, there was a small issue thing like the timeout for a Lambda function. That was actually my first for the Wing project, and I thought, okay, that's a small thing, though. Let's get started. I know what to do, and so I hacked it together and opened the PR. I got reviewed. A few days later, it was merged and published, and it was wow, 2 days in this project and already contributed and have something live in the product. That was really nice experience. And after that was okay. Now it was mostly copy pasting and seeing what the other stuff was looking like. So I wanted to dig deeper and understand the concepts and stuff like that of the Wing programming language and framework. So I put up a bigger issue. The one you already mentioned was building a complete resource. So at that time, we didn't have the API resource.
Oh, you built the API?
Yet.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
One of the
yes,
biggest.
So I
yes,
thought, okay,
yes.
Wow.
It's not a big thing to build it in Terraform or AWS CDK. So I thought, okay, let's do it.
Wow.
And after a bit back and forth, about, I think it took 2 or 2.5 weeks or more even to get it finalized. So
you know, it
cool.
wasn't an easy task to do, Raphael.
A real application with Wing from this point on. The funny thing was actually that it was implemented in the AWS cloud first.
Right.
So the cloud implementation was first, and then Chris took up and implemented the simulator. That was a cool thing, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's I remember seeing someone picking this up. I said, "Oh my God, where I mean, I didn't know you. Where is this gonna go?" I mean, it's a complex resource.
Exactly.
We're starting from the cloud. What's I mean, and even when Chris was trying to pick up the local host, the simulator stuff, I said, "This is not gonna work. I mean, the abstraction is gonna leak everywhere." And
But then Raphael did his magic.
yeah, and then I saw it. Everything is working. I mean, it's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Any other kind of?
I think it actually wasn't planned for as a P1 resource at the beginning, and
Right. This is.
but I could not break anything within your schedule, so just do it. Try it out.
Right, it wasn't planned as P1. It's a story of a lot of the resources. I think the schedule resources looks like, I mean, a lot of things are kind of coming from surprise. We're going to talk later a little bit on the secret resource. I didn't even know how it's going to be done, and then I think it was Jonathan Goldwasser that basically done that. I said, okay, this is done. Okay, what's going on here? And it's crazy, and it's really kind of the power of this project that I mean, we need to get momentum to push this forward from more angles.
Yeah. So, Raphael, how about you demoing your winning project?
The winning project.
Sure thing. Let's try this. Actually, another funny thing, the Wingathon contribution was actually the first real application written in Wing for me. So even though I wrote some resources for it, I had never worked with the language itself really much. So it was challenging already.
Right, because the resources are written in TypeScript right now. We have plans for this, but right now all the resources are written in TypeScript. Awesome.
So I hope I see my screen now.
Yes, I can. Let me change the layout a little bit. Maybe not like this. Okay.
So my idea or contribution for the Wingathon number one was a small Slack bot that enables you to get up with all those releases that are occurring all the time with the Wing project. So,
Raphael, do you mind getting the font kind of
a little bit bigger?
A little bit bigger, probably. I mean, most of us are pretty old, so we're not seeing anything.
We?
Yeah, I mean, this is good. This is good.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
So the idea,
the Slack bot.
To have a Slack bot you can ask every day or every few hours or whenever you have time to catch up with all the releases that happened since the last time you checked. And yeah, that's basically it. Let me just run the application. So go over to the IDE and first of all, I think I will run it, the application, so we can see it.
Raphael, same ask here, if you can increase the font just a little bit.
Sure.
Thank you.
So for those of you who don't know, basically what Raphael is doing is running the Wing CLI come package with the Wingit command that basically launches the console, which is basically a visualization of the local simulator. And this is what we're seeing on screen. And this is basically kind of your application architecture, right?
Yes. Okay. It's actually just one API resource. Okay. So I have here the cloud API resource, which has one API endpoint. You can see it. I hope it's big enough.
Yeah, I think you can see it, yeah.
Which has one API endpoint, and I think here you can see it as a post endpoint. I'm not sure if I can use some fancy Mac features to zoom in. No.
Okay. That's a good suggestion. We have a suggestion to go to dark mode. What do you think about that?
Sure.
So right now, I think going to dark mode. This is I think that is not released. You need to go to dark mode with the Mac, but in the next release of the console, it will be kind of
dark mode.
Yay!
Awesome.
Yay!
Great. Looks much better. Thanks.
Yes.
So we have
So
one
nice.
API route, a post endpoint for commands. That's the API route that will be invoked
Right.
by the Slack webhook
Right.
API.
Wait, thanks. So okay, so you're gonna run this? Okay.
So yeah, to be able to connect it to the actual Slack app, I will run up a local endpoint with ncroc. I can get the running application. So this is actually already running on my local machine. That's an Express application serving this endpoint and the code behind it, and that's a local implementation of my application. So if I connect it to the cloud.
Right. So while you're typing, basically, Rafael is going to show us how this works with on the application running locally, but Slack doesn't know how to access the application running locally. It doesn't have a static IP. So he's using ngrok, basically that creates a static IP, and then it links it, that basically kind of tunnels this into the local host implementation, right?
Yes, that's totally right. So now we're set up.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I'm again in the light screen.
Okay.
It's okay. It's okay.
That's good. Thanks, man.
So now if I run first time, hopefully I get my Slack command, releases, hopefully right typo, no, wrong typo. It's always a demo effect.
Yeah.
So off talking, it's an ngrok issue, since right?
As always in the demo. So maybe switch. Okay. Something isn't working with my demo.
Okay.
So maybe you can switch to the. Do we have the video somewhere for my presentation?
Yeah, let me look for it for a second.
Let me ask you, Rafael, while Eyal is looking for some stuff here. You have experience with a lot of programming languages. How do you compare your experience with Wing to other programming languages?
So I actually have worked with TypeScript right now mostly, and before that it was like Python and some Kotlin stuff. And actually Wing was not that difficult to adapt. So I'm very happy that we removed the tilde operator, because it's a quite complicated one on a German keyboard layout.
Okay, interesting.
Not visible here, only if you know the combination. So I was happy there for. And after that, it was easily to adapt. It was you see that it's heavily inspired by TypeScript or JavaScript, but that wasn't what makes it easy for me to adapt, actually. And with things like Copilot, you get really fast used to it, and yeah.
Awesome. Those are some of the goals that we have had in our mind. So I'm really happy to hear that.
So I'm going to try. I'm going to try to stream this. I need to understand from Nadav. Is this being?
But maybe we need to mute it.
Yeah, I'm going to mute this.
Awesome.
And this is the application. You wanna. So let's see the demo itself,
yes,
right?
Yes, the demo itself.
Okay.
Exactly.
Great. So what we're seeing, what do you want to, let me hit play.
Can you increase it? Or?
Let me see if I can increase this a little bit. Maybe like this, open in a new window. Okay, I'm trying.
Mute. Rafael, I want to ask you two questions. What did you like the most and what did you hate the most with Wing?
I think what I liked most was the fast feedback cycle for Wing applications. So
using the console and
using the console, seeing what you're building, the ability to write tests against it already. They are all executing very fast, and that was quite nice to see. And the second big thing actually was the in-flight API. So it was so cool to interact with. I'm not sure if there's speech here or not. Interact with AWS resources within your application, just like there are normal classes in your program or stuff like that. That is really, really cool to do not have to set up environment variables, Lambda functions, and wire up all those stuff together. Just said, okay, here's the bucket, here's the runtime, the in-flight code, and you can interact with those resources like normal objects in your application. And it was so cool, actually. And I've never had any issues with IAM policies or some other permissions or stuff like that. So that was really cool to experience.
Interesting. So you're covering kind of the essential kind of value proposition of Wing. One of them is I'm able to iterate really fast with the local simulator and the console. Number two, now I have a resource with two APIs. The one, the pre-flight API that allows me to provision it and basically set up the stuff, and then the in-flight API that is available. I mean, the IDE or the language basically gives it to you. In your keyboard, and you can interact with it. And then the last thing is that there's other things going on behind the scenes that are setting up IAM roles, and so these are.
And using resources as glasses.
Yeah,
it's part of the language.
Right.
Which
awesome.
It's amazing.
Yes.
I think that we were trying to pick up the video, but I can't make it kind of be really good. I think it's going to be a stretch. What we'll do, I think we can post kind of the demo video.
Definitely, we will post the video, and as we mentioned before, we will find some way to basically show all of the amazing projects that we have had. We want to share them with everyone. So we'll definitely have more opportunities.
Yeah, unless it's working for you already. I don't know if you fixed it already.
How could he? He
No,
was chatting with me.
I mean, I can do what he's doing. Maybe you can do other stuff. I don't know.
Wow,
Awesome.
amazing. Raphael, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure. It is a pleasure to have you with us.
I'm not sure if you know that our next kind of guest appearance, it's Mark the DJ. Have you worked with Mark a little bit?
Oh, not really, but I always enjoyed his music selection.
Yeah, he has a kind of a especially long session for us today. So I think we want to thank you very much.
Thank
Raphael.
you so much, Raphael.
You're going to go, and Uri's going to replace us. So I want to thank you also, Revital, for
Pleasure
being
to be here with you.
And thank you very much. And let's take this to Mark the DJ.
Mark the DJ.
Thanks, Raphael.
Thank you. Bye.
Ignore the cat in frame right now. He'll just be there. I had some fun trivia to go over today. Some Windows trivia. Most, all, or if not all, versions of Windows have sample music. And I have a particularly nice memory of Windows 7's sample music that they included. One of them was Kalimba by Mr. Scruff. Very good song, and it was crazy to me that they just like, oh, this is like a real song. It's like a real, actual good song. I get it for free? Oh, sweet. And I was able to look into Mr. Scruff, and I liked a lot of his music. So I want to thank Bill Gates personally for including that song. I'm sure it was his decision. And I won't play that song, but I'll play another one of my favorites from Mr. Scruff, which is Get a Move On.
And we're back. Thank you, Mark, for this nice kind of Windows, Microsoft historical review, and also for that excellent song. And we're going to hear a little bit about that song in the future. And we have, of course, Uri, our favorite guest after Revital.
And Mark, and Marcio, and Rafael,
and
maybe
Rafael.
also, yeah.
So kind of, in the list of our favorite guests.
Yeah.
Yes.
At least top 10.
Top 10. Top 10. We had 9 so far. So I'm glad you're here. It's always fun to have you here. What are you here to show us today?
Oh man, some nice things we did throughout the hackathon, the Wingathon.
The Wingathon.
And yeah, I was lucky to also work on one of the teams, and I partnered with one of our strongest developers, Shai Einwohner.
Yep.
He leads the console team.
Right.
You've seen the console and what he can do.
Right.
So basically what we wanted to build is, we wanted to see if Wing was mature enough to build a real world application similar to apps we've built dozens of times,
Right.
hundreds of times probably.
Right.
So it's just a website, a static website that calls an API through API gateway,
Okay.
and it has a database. We used Redis.
Okay.
Let's take a look at the code, and I'll walk you through it.
Awesome. So we have on our agenda also the secrets. Can you also kind of show us, kind of zoom in on the secrets, when you're going to use it? Because this is a kind of a new resource that we were using. But when you're saying a website, was everything in this, I mean, did you use something else beside Wing to create the website, or?
So the website is a static website built in React.
Okay.
But we're just, the website resource is not yet available, so you get a sneak peek into what we are working on.
Right.
And that basically just put all of the static website files into a bucket
Right.
and puts a CDN in front of it, a content delivery network.
Right. If it runs on AWS, it's
Right.
with a CDN. If it's going to run on localhost, we're going to see it. Awesome. Great. So this is your code.
Yeah, so we're seeing the code, and basically this is phenomenal because with, I don't know how many lines of Wing, with
Wow.
less than 200 lines of Wing, it printed, I think, 3,000 lines of Terraform, and that's 76 different resources.
Yeah. Just Redis itself in AWS is Elastic Cache with VPC.
and security
Yeah,
groups
right.
and Lambda. Yeah, of course. And the IAM roles for everything, of course.
Right.
It adds up.
Right.
But we really wanted to use a bunch of features of Wing and to show how they all work well together. And that was a test for us. We didn't know when we set out to start this project that it's actually going to work.
Yeah.
So we built using extern. We were fetching some restaurants from Google Places API.
Right. So the external keyword is for you to use kind of external JavaScript code that is not in the Wing.
Exactly.
And you're using list restaurants, which has a location, a keyword, and an API key, and that goes into the.
Let's take a quick look at it. So it basically uses the Google Places API URL and calls it and brings back a JSON.
Do you want to tell us what you're trying to achieve with this amazing app?
Sure. So we wanted to build something practical and something that we are very, very concerned about when we come to the office around noon is where to eat. Where should we eat?
Right. And this is also with Shai Einwohner.
That's his influence, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yes. When he gets hungry, you don't want to be near him, and we need to get to a decision where to eat really, really quick.
He's a visionary.
Yeah, he's a visionary. So we want to zero in on hummus.
We figured 90% of the times we at least consider whether we should go to a hummus place.
Okay.
So we hard-coded hummus for now, and that's what we're building.
Awesome.
But let me real quick go over what we've used here. So beside the extern code, JavaScript code to fetch the restaurant list, we're also using structs, to have all of our data types. We have interfaces.
Nice.
We use the classes, of course, and we use 2 classes basically here. One for the database, Redis.
Right.
And this one also uses the secrets, which we will talk in a second. And the other class, I'll scroll quickly here. It basically has the front end, the website, and the API in it.
Yeah, so those of you who are paying closely, we used to have resources in this application, this code, and now we have classes. Basically, the where to it is a class. And one of those members is the Redis and the counter. These are also classes, so basically going to be instances of the class. in practice, they are resources of the cloud, right?
Right.
But those classes, those pre-flight classes, basically we replace the resource keyword with the class and the pre-flight classes. Right? Awesome.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a very good call out.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned before, we used a couple of secrets.
Okay.
Secret is a new resource. It was developed by Jonathan Goldwasser.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah,
Time to applause, guy.
And it's a wrap around the AWS secret mechanism.
Awesome.
And basically, you can put any secret in there, and you can later, we will probably support some rotation and all of the other features that are supported in there. But right now, it's just a key store to put in your secrets.
Awesome. So basically, Cloud Secret is a kind of another abstraction that we have. It's implemented for AWS. It's implemented with the AWS key store. How is it implemented in the localhost?
So I think it's just a file where you keep
some kind of JSON file.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Okay.
So yes, besides that, you can see that we use the counter, obviously.
Of course
you have to use the counter. You can't do anything without a counter.
There is a question coming?
Someone's asking if all this dog fooding samples can be found somewhere.
Yeah, so first of all, can you post
I
this?
pasted the link.
Okay, you pasted the link. So it's, all those dog fooding are on the Winglang /research.
Research repository. I don't know if it's publicly available, but if it's not, we'll make it available.
It should be publicly available. Okay.
I won't get into all of the different.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. These are all the APIs that we're using, and let's just take a look first and how it looks on AWS, just real quick.
Okay.
So as I said, 76 resources were created as part of this app.
Wow.
It's a lot, but it's so nice because we don't really have to worry about all these small little things like connecting all the right IAM roles and giving least privilege permissions.
And we mentioned the security, the VPC, yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at what I have on S3, obviously the buckets that are created. One of them is the website for the static content of the website.
Awesome.
And the other one is the bucket for the code. Hassan from our team recently
kind of merged all the code.
Yes,
that's a great addition.
All of the different Lambda code into one
in
bucket.
a single bucket, right?
Yeah, and the website is obviously developed by Tsuf, another gifted developer on our team. Yeah. And okay, so let's last thing, just see the thing in work.
And the actual kind of S3 bucket is served over CloudFront, which I see in the other tab. So yeah, okay.
Okay.
They're asking you to
to lift myself up. I will. Thank you. And okay, so when we open the website, it shows you the list of home places around you.
Right.
Those are the recommended one. We have our list of favorites. Okay, and that's persisted to our database. So if I add, let's say, let's add one of the places here. Then it appears on the other list on the left.
Okay, so the right side of the list is basically kind of the cloud API, the Google API places, and then once I do add to favorite, it pushes, we call the API gateway, it goes to Redis, it adds it, and then you fetch it from the other side, and basically, wow, awesome.
Exactly. It's a route that all of us are doing in millions of apps out there, but it was important for us to see how this could be achievable in Wing and what's going to be the experience.
Right, because you need a database, you need to manage secrets because you don't want things to be known, and you need that separation. You need a website that is available for everyone. We have CloudFront for that, and you need a REST API to interact with. Awesome, that's great.
Yeah,
that's great. Anything else you want to share about this?
I think that was a great project to test, and we're looking forward to fixing all the small little things that we found throughout dog fooding, throughout this Wingathon.
I was sitting behind you, and one of the nice observations, we need to move forward after that. One of the nice observations I've heard Shai saying, you had problem with the deployment because things were, as you mentioned, this is really bleeding edge technology. The cloud, the website resource was really, really young and not prepared, and you choose to use it. And I remember Shai saying, oh my God, if this would have worked without we needed to go back and forth and redeploy this to AWS, it would be much nicer. So basically writing the code, making sure that it runs on the local host was really, really fast and easy.
Right.
And then all the back and forth iteration, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take this back and forth iteration and move it aside. You don't need this. Once it works on your machine, it's going to work on the cloud, on any cloud. Right now, it only works on AWS cloud.
For now.
For now. Awesome.
More clouds are coming.
So thank you, and thank you for Shaye for doing this. And now I'm asking for applause for everyone here. Applause. and thank you for joining me. And now what we're gonna have Elad's gonna join us with Massimo. But before, a little bit more about from Mark Music, please.
Oh yes, please.
Awesome. We're good? Very good. Exactly.
They're back.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we're back. Thank you, Massimo. This was kind of a part of our technical setup that I didn't manage that well. Thank you very much, Massimo, for coming. Thank you, Elad, for joining.
Hey man, what's up?
What do you think about the show so far?
It's great. I actually couldn't hear some of it because you were talking.
Okay.
But I was watching on Twitch, and we actually have like almost 30 viewers, which is a nice number.
That's a nice number for us. And I think we have still some technical problem. Massimo, are you unmuted on the other one? Yes, you're supposed to hear him.
We can hear him.
It seems like you're muted on the other one. Can you open the video with him for a second? Okay, they still have you on mute. Maybe try to refresh the page for a second on the other side, on the other one.
Refresh.
Yeah, refresh and rejoin. Kind of.
Leave the room. Leave the building. Shut down the light.
Yeah. So kind of rejoin and try to do this. Let's hope it's going to work.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Everybody
Okay,
can
we're
hear you.
good.
Awesome. Great.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Exit, and re-enter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Always.
exactly.
I think we're old enough to. I used to like reformat my hard drive about every month. Was kind of like my hobby as a kid. I had like this like setup. I would like reformat my entire hard drive, all my floppy disks. I would like it.
Yeah.
It was like my thing.
I was a Linux administrator at the time, at one point, and rebooting the machine was considered a huge failure for me. If I would go in the reboot, I said, it usually worked, but and on Windows one time I deleted the autoexec.bat, and my older brother almost killed me. That's my story from formatting and destroying computers.
You don't look that old, Elad.
I'm 43.
Yeah.
So I've been playing with computers when they were like XT and Atari computers and anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a Commodore 64.
Oh,
There
nice.
you go.
Nice.
There you go.
Nice.
That's kind of how you age people.
Exactly.
You ask them,
Your first-
what was the first computer that you had?
Yeah, mine was XT as well. I mean,
So
Atari was.
what did you do with the Commodore? Do you remember?
Just playing.
Playing games.
I was not. Yeah, I was not into IT the way that I am into IT. That has been growing on me later on, but at that time it was mostly playing games.
And
Yeah.
where did you grow up?
I grew up in Milan, Italy.
Milan, Italy. So you're Italian, I guess.
I am Italian. Lots of travels, but always based here.
Nice.
Cool. Well, so thanks for joining us, man. It's a pleasure to have you. We know each other from Amazon, and I was actually thinking, I was thinking about you, and I was like, wow, that could be a really fun guest for a little show. Ayala doesn't know you, so
Right.
I guess that's going to be a fun chat. But to be honest, tell us a little bit about your background, your journey,
Yeah.
how did you get to do what you're doing now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I do have gray hairs. I'm older than you are, so I've been around for more time. I actually started at IBM many years ago. I spent like 15 years at IBM. I then moved on onto VMware.
Nice.
And I eventually landed on at Amazon, where we met. My history has been pretty much in the compute space. I pride myself of having seen pretty much all the abstractions that existed in the x86 space, because when I was at IBM, I started on the x86 brand that we had at the time, Netfinity X series. That was the time where OS2 was kind of winding down and Windows was kind of starting up. So I've been doing a lot of, Windows stuff. Back in the days, given the context that we were talking about, just to give you like a rough example, I mean, the way that you would distribute and deploy code was the developer would write an application, they would zip it into a file, and they would email it to someone managing a Windows computer for them to somehow install. So imagine, what happened in these last 30 years or so.
Yeah,
what we're discussing today.
I feel need to zip up archives and upload them to S3 so that they can be deployed. I don't know that we're
not that
yeah,
far.
exactly.
No, but yeah, it's interesting. It depends on what you're doing and what you're actually, working on. And it happens always to me to either think, oh, wow, in these 5 years, everything has changed. And in other situations, it's like, I was doing this thing 25 years ago. Right? Nothing has really changed.
Right.
I've been working on stuff where people were talking about Pixie Boot. And I'm
remember.
I started with Pixie Boot. Like you install servers on the network with Pixie Boot and these sort of things. And in 2023, we're still talking about Pixie Boot.
What's Pixie Boot?
So yeah,
guys.
It's when you can, correct me if I'm wrong, you can install a machine, or boot a machine from the network.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow, okay.
Yes. And you actually can install the machine.
Yeah.
So back in the days, the way that you would deploy an array of servers is you would rack them up, you connect them to the network, and you would configure their network card to boot and install from the network. So you had a server that would vend these images to those other servers that you want to install, and they would boot up and do these install.
It's basically the network version of my reformatting my hard drive.
Right? Exactly.
It's like the dream. That's what I've been looking for eventually.
Exactly. So I wanted to also talk a little bit about the abstraction that I've seen, because when I was at IBM, I was working on this hardware stuff, and then we built this monstrous machine that nobody really wanted because it was too big. So I was talking to the engineers at IBM, and they were like, "Yeah, this server, nobody wants this server because it's too big." So we're talking to this company that is doing this software hypervisor thing.
Nice.
They're called VMware. They're like 3 people in California. And I look at the engineer drawing on the whiteboard, and I was like, you must be kidding. This is not going to work. I mean, you put a hypervisor in there. What are you doing?
It's what you told
So
me.
he
It's
gave
what
me
you
the
told me
CD.
about Wing. No, I'm joking.
No, no. So he gave me the CD. I went back home and I tried it in the lab, and immediately I was like, this thing is going to change the world.
Wow.
So I started working on VMware. I eventually went to VMware working on virtualization stuff. And then same experience with containers.
Right.
And then Lambda, serverless, event-driven architecture, which is pretty much what I'm doing right now at AWS. So I pride myself for having seen pretty much every abstraction in the x86 space that ever happened.
Yeah, amazing. I feel like I had a thought about like these technologies that's from the past that are still here with us. I feel like it's in this amazing test for these like if a technology is still here, it means that there's something that works about it. There's like this, you look at HTTP and HTML and
Right.
POSIX and the Unix architectures and x86 and it's actually pretty amazing to see how these technologies kind of aged well in a sense, and some obviously didn't.
Yes. And all the speculation that the next abstraction would remove the previous abstraction, that never happened, right? So serverless runs on servers.
Right.
Yes,
So
of course.
on hypervisors and everything that we have seen in the last 25, 30 years.
Right.
Maybe you don't see it,
Right.
because if you run in the cloud, you don't have to see it, but it's there. Someone has to manage it.
So what are you up to today? What's your tell us about your role,
Yeah, so I have a very interesting role. I really love what I do at AWS. I'm a technologist, whatever that means. So I work very much on technology. Part of my job is to scout new technology and see, what's coming next in the space that I'm in, which is pretty much the compute space, especially containers and serverless. That's kind of what I do. So I work with Deepak Singh that manage all that portfolio of services.
So like Lambda, ECS,
It spans
Kubernetes,
from containers, typical containers products like ECS, EKS, Fargate, all the way to serverless Lambda, integration services like Event Bridge, Step Function. I also work on infrastructure as code. There is this thing called CDK. I'm not sure if you heard about this.
I don't know.
Not gonna work.
Maybe you heard about this. So in that context, I do very much two things. So I do both outbound and inbound work. So in the outbound work, which I'm doing less and less these days, I try to explain to the market, what we're doing. I would say that what we're doing here checks the outbound mark, even though this is way more informal and I don't intend to talk about AWS here. But that is pretty much what I'm doing from an outbound perspective, blogs, events, stuff like that. Where I spend most of my time right now is with the inbound part. So I like to work with PMs, engineer, and the leadership team in my organization to try to understand where the market is going, where the technology is going, where the users want to go, and try to bring in that feedback inside the organization. I always joke about the fact that my role is to take something and tell the PMs how wrong that is, which sometimes happens. Like I express my opinion. They don't always listen, which is fine because that's how it works. But I really like and I really enjoy the work that I did. Yeah.
So you're basically working across the portfolio, making sure that there's. I can see how when you're in a company like Amazon, it kind of feels sometimes like the world is Amazon, right? Like the world is like it starts and ends, and it's really important to like constantly bring in what's going on in the industry, because otherwise you get into this really powerful echo chamber, right? Like and I feel like it's really challenging, but I guess it's also becoming more and more challenging as AWS is kind of covering more and more surface area and doing more things.
Yes. I think it's bidimensional, so to speak. Like there is a dimension which is internal, where I mean you heard the joke about there are 17 ways to run containers at AWS. So there is
I haven't heard that joke.
Word that you
What's the joke?
you never heard that?
That's the
There
joke.
are 17 ways. Yeah, there are 17 ways to run containers on AWS. Okay, if you haven't heard that, that's fine. But the joke is about the complexity and the number of services that we have. So that there is that dimension that I try to work to rationalize a little bit, and having these services work better together. And then there is the dimension that you're alluding to, which is what's happening outside of AWS, right? I mean, open source is like a big driver these days about a lot of things that we do. So keeping an eye outside of AWS to see what's going on in that space and how we can both contribute and consume those technologies is absolutely key these days.
So I'm interested in knowing what's your read from the field about the kind of the serverless versus Kubernetes tension? Is there where are we going right now?
Yeah. This is part of a lot of discussions that we're having internally. Like, how do we message to the market the way that we build our services, and the way that we're trying to describe this is that, of course, AWS is the product, right? So people come in and try to use AWS as the product, but in our space is very much like, do you want to offload as much as possible to AWS? Right. And in that case, you end up using a lot of the serverless products that we have, like, Fargate and Lambda and Eventbridge as step function in the classical serverless manner. Or are you coming in with an SRE kind of platform engineering background where you want to build a platform for your internal developers, for example? And those people tend to gravitate more around open source technology, Kubernetes. They may have experience with Kubernetes on-prem, and they want to bring that experience into the cloud. So those are the two big buckets that we see. Of course, the way that our users use this technology varies depending on the background, the size. Big customers tend to use all of these services in one way or the other. Smaller customers or maybe individual developers tend to elect one or few of these services to work with. Very typical developers that try to create a gravity around serverless, like Lambda and that space, and others that maybe buy into the Kubernetes ecosystem. They pick other products.
Awesome, great.
It's a good answer.
It's a very. We're going to talk about this answer.
And we didn't even prepare them.
No, but it's definitely. I think it's a very Amazonian kind of approach to these things. Is like it's an and answer. It's not an or answer.
Right.
It's like the world is complex. It's diverse. The needs are diverse. It's okay to live in a world where there's multiple options and more choice. I feel like that's a very strong Amazonian kind of DNA.
Yeah.
It comes from retail, right? Like when you go to the shop, you want more choice. It's always true. Right. So I feel like that's what Amazon's doing with the cloud, but I also think it's what customers eventually need, right? Like they need to be able to choose the right tools.
Yeah. There's a lot of confirmation bias when you listen to people. I've heard kind of the dichotomy between platform engineering team and then then kind of open source Kubernetes, and then non-platform engineering team, and then basically relying on the Amazon serverless platform. That's what I've heard, but it's again confirming what I thought. So that's what I was hearing.
Yeah, but the thing is, Amazon has both.
Yeah, of course.
Both,
of course,
of course. Why not?
Why not? Why not?
And it's not usually. I mean, what I'm trying to simplify. Yeah, but what I'm trying to simplify is like the trends and the patterns that we see. And then you end up seeing a customer that has a very strong platform engineering team with serverless because they need to put some guardrails, for example, or stuff like that. So they need people that are setting in place those guardrails. And maybe you have a lean startup company using Kubernetes because they want to do that. But the patterns that we see are those that I've described before.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So what kind of trends, what kind of like shifts are you seeing that might be interesting and related in relation to like the areas that you're at? Like what?
I think in the context of what you're trying to build, I think that because I want to be, I want to talk maybe things that are in the context of what you're building. I think that this progression from the joke, which isn't a joke that I was making, like how customers used to deploy stuff by sending zipping emails and stuff, all the way to what you're trying to build is a trend that I see having a lot of lag. So if you think about the progression that we had over the years, over the last 20 years, going through DevOps, right, and developers being more aware of how you deploy stuff on those servers in the end, going through CDK, for example, which is a tool that allows developers to say, I want to use the programming language that I've been using forever to write both the application code as well as the infrastructure as code. If you draw a line between this trend, you end up pretty much where you are working on right now, right? So why do I need two things? One to express the application logic, and one to express the infrastructure deployment, right? I want to write one thing, and I want maybe someone or something to infer the infrastructure that I need for the code that I'm running. So I definitely see what you're working on definitely as being a hot space in terms of where the customers are going. There are maybe discussions in terms of who is going to do what. Going back to the platform engineering team versus the developer doing pretty much everything. Of course, in the platform engineering team, there may be guardrails that they need to put in place where inferring the infrastructure from the code that the developer is writing is not the right thing to do. So, for example, I like the fact that you are downstream splitting the code into Terraform and application code so that you can take that Terraform and give it to someone else for them to manage, right? And to maybe enforce some additional guardrails from the default that you emit, for example. So without getting into the specific, I think that there is a trend here that basically you're trying to intercept.
I think in a way we're trying to create, we want to say these are two different tasks. It might be the same person doing them, but there's the functional aspect of my application, and then there's the how this application is being deployed. You haven't seen this in this job, where we have a term called policy that basically kind of goes and it knows, I mean, if you're deploying to AWS CDK, the policy is written in AWS CDK, in Terraform, basically. In AWS,
are we still calling it policy?
Policy and
plugins.
Plugin. I think it's dash P.
Dash P. Yeah, we're like.
So and again, it's about those things are two different things, and I'm sure we're going to see people using. I mean, complete separation. People are doing this thing and people are doing that thing, and we're going to see people who are doing both. But we don't want. When you're thinking about the kind of the functional part of your application, how it's operated, I mean, and where infrastructure and code and application code are basically the same. If I'm using, I've come from JVM, from Java, and I had PubSub, I had topics, I had linked lists, I had all of those things. It just wasn't infrastructure. I was doing new linked list, and I had a linked list and a reentrant lock. All those things were not infrastructure, but they were locked in one machine. So we want to bring back that flow for people doing this, and then the other side. So it's going to be super interesting to see how this kind of relates with, especially platform engineering teams.
But to your point earlier, I'm curious because this question about who is it for, right? Like I feel like we don't have the great answer about this right now. I feel like it's really interesting because of these trends that you're talking about, the platform engineering, the DevOps, like even the terminology is not right. Like the term DevOps, different different organizations think about it differently, right? Like for some organization thinks about DevOps as like giving devs the responsibility on ops, and some people think about DevOps as kind of like the low level, SRE type. Right. So I'm curious, like what, if you have any thoughts about that.
Yes, to everything that you said. I think that one of the challenges is the nomenclature, like the terminology that we use. In addition to like complexity that exists anyway, there is also a communication gap in terms of I said DevOps and I meant this, and on the other side, they heard DevOps and they heard something completely different, right, from what they understand. But other than these, which is a detail, right, which is possibly solvable, I think that every organization has a setup that is very unique, right? So they have like they remind of patterns that we see, so you can bucket them in some of these 2, 3, 4 different buckets, but they, at the end of the day, they tend to operate in a very peculiar way, and that is more driven. I mean, of course, it's not driven by technology. It's more driven by organizational posture, right? So we operate this way, so we do these, right? So that is part of the challenge. We went through some of these very, very deep discussion with when we launched on the market a product called AWS Proton. I'm not sure if you heard about that, but of course, I mean, we started with the assumption that this platform engineering team was owning pretty much everything, right? And the developer would just click or run an API to deploy part of that infrastructure. As we started to talk more to customers, we heard that there were lots of different type of these customers, right? So for some of them, this model worked fine, but for others that we call the cowboy kind of, developers that were on the other side of these fence, the platform team wanted to just set up some guardrails, as I said, not providing templates or anything, just guardrails and telling the developers, go do whatever you want, as long as you stay within the guardrails.
Yeah.
If you try to go outside of these guardrails, I'm not going to allow you to do that. But you can see how the power, quote to quote, is moving on the spectrum, right? And it's a big challenge. The reason why I said that you seem to be on a good path is because the way that you're structuring these allows you to intercept both the cowboy developers that own everything, because they can write the code, let your stuff infer the infrastructure and deploy it, all the way to the other side where you can split these, right? So you can infer the code, give it to the people that are creating those templates, and they're stamping like this is a good thing to to make available for everyone as a template within their guardrails. So in that case, it becomes more of an infrastructure as code generator, so to speak, that you can take and customize. Whereas in the first case is more like an end-to-end solution. Like I build my application, I click here, and it's live. I don't even know what happened in between.
Yeah, exactly.
So kind of the separation is not about the personas, it's about the job to be done. What are you doing right now?
And I think in that sense, I was...
No, come on, we're in Israel.
No, I think this is why I think thinking about it more mechanically and less about whose responsibility it is. These are the layers. This is the mechanical layers.
But just to echo what Massimo was talking, I was just talking with a friend of mine, an entrepreneur. He's doing a lot of research with the platform engineering space. The number one problem he's hearing right now is taxonomy. I mean, a platform engineering team wants, even inside a single company, he wants to create a platform. okay, what is an application? What is a project? What is a repo? What is the DevOps? Everything is different. That's his number one problem, which is insane.
It's really hard.
But we know it's a very hard. I mean, we all wrote code. We know that this is
Naming
a really hard,
is the
really hard problem.
It's amazing. It's amazing how you speak to customers, and on one hand, you realize that they're building something that is, different, right? Because of what we said before, because they're organized differently, whatever. But if you zoom out a little bit, it's amazing how they're building pretty much the same thing, right? At the high level. Right. As you get into the details, it works a little bit different. Right. And I think that it boils down to like a flip that you need to do in your mind. I remember writing this blog post maybe 15 years ago, where I very much said that cloud of 15 years ago, right? Not cloud today, which is completely different, but cloud 15 years ago is about this mind flip, right? Because in the data center, you build your infrastructure based on the application requirements. Right. So, I need to deploy SAP. I need to deploy this thing. So let's build this piece of infrastructure to host that application. Cloud is the other way around. Yeah, right. So these are the pieces that I have available. Let's build an application based
on these constraints. Pieces,
right. So it's I'll send you the link of that. It's sometimes I go back to this blog that I wrote. Like,
and you just read it and you enjoy it. And it's like, who wrote this thing? It's so nice.
This is good.
but it's actually pretty much about that. So you see all these customers building these platforms because they think that they need something unique, and maybe they need something unique. So they build them from the ground up, and it takes them years to build them. And there are other organizations that look at what's available and they say, okay, I kind of like 80% of it, but because of that 20%, I'm going to adapt.
Right.
I'm not going to spend 2 years reinventing the 100% to make it my thing. Right. So that's
which is, by the way, it's an interesting. It's kind of like related to the Wing SDK that we have, right? Like the Wing is shipped with an SDK that supports a bunch of cloud resources that we believe are the fundamental resources. And I know that at AWS, it's kind of like almost not allowed to distinguish between services and say these are the most important services, right? Like, but the reality is that it's a stack, right? And at the bottom of the stack, there's the fundamental services that everything eventually can be built on top of them. And the APIs that we have in the SDK are also, it's basically some kind of a common denominator. And like you say, maybe when you go and you look at this common denominator, you're like, well, this is kind of like 80% of what I need. I can probably build my stuff with it. And then I'm going to be able to run it locally and iterate quickly. And the APIs are really consistent and easy. And I don't really have to understand all the details of the lower layer. And so it's very similar in that sense. Like you're basically saying there's value to opinion. There's value to reducing the surface area, to giving simpler, less capabilities, so that you can like focus on the higher layer.
Even though, I kind of agree. Even though it's going to be a very difficult balance to simplify to the extreme and offering something that they need. Right? So there are a lot of, what I see in the market, right, is a lot of neat startups coming up offering like a super simple workflow to do X, Y, Z. Whereas on these other cloud environment, it takes forever to build the same thing. Right. So for that particular workflow, it's absolutely top notch. Right. It takes 10 seconds to deploy these things. But it suddenly ran out of gas when you start using it at scale. Right. At scale, lots of customers, especially enterprise customers that are very unique in their environment. So it's almost like a cycle, right? So you start neat. It takes 10 seconds to deploy something very simple, and then you add complexity because your customers are going to ask you a number of additional things, and that when it starts to become you can say complex or powerful, depending on how you say it.
Yeah, we're super mindful of that. I feel like, I call it the Heroku problem, right?
I didn't want to mention
we're allowed. But that's a classic, problem of like there's a vertical solution and it solves it really solves a specific use case very well. But then, we kind of had these conversations when we were talking about CDK and SAM. That was a good. There were a lot of conversations around that when CDK was. We kind of tried to make sure that the CDK is built as an open and extensible framework where anybody can basically use any resource eventually. And we're doing the same thing with Wing. And so with Wing, you have like these SDK resources, which are the standard library, but then you can literally use any cloud resource in your application as a first-class citizen.
Yeah.
And you can use these plugins to customize exactly how these resources are going to be deployed on the specific provider that you're targeting. Because obviously, there is a lot of differentiation between the offerings. I'd argue that the differentiation mostly happens on the non-functional side of these foundational resources. A bucket is a bucket from a functional perspective. Obviously, S3 has like 3,000 million different features than Azure buckets, right? Like that's completely. But I feel like mostly the application interface, the interface that the application needs to interact with, and obviously, proofs on us, of course.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. I when people ask me about this project, about the risk, there's the adoption risk because if it's a new language. So that's going to take some time and some courage and but that's an adoption. That's kind of a business risk. But I still think that the technical risk, not for the entire project, for the cloud stuff.
For the cloud.
Will this abstraction fail? Will I be able to carry on this abstraction to complex resources? I mean, I have to say that my conviction went up, but it's still something that needs to be proven. We don't know yet, and it's a journey that we're inviting other people. I'm excited to have this journey.
I think that the jury is out on these. I mean, I don't know. It reminds me of also early days of abstractions across clouds. Like I remember like 10, 15 years ago, there were products that would allow you to abstract like, two cloud providers having a single API to deploy a VM on both, this cloud with a single API, because at the end of the day, a VM is a VM, right? I would say that did not win in terms of, the way that customers are consuming those cloud infrastructure, because they go to either one or the other, not through these abstraction. I think that 15 years in, the game is totally different. But I think that the jury is still out in terms of can you abstract in a way that is efficient and completely transparent and
non-leaky right? Like
and non-leaky. Well, of course, a leaky abstraction is no longer an abstraction, right? So
exactly. And I agree. I feel like with operating systems and traditional computing and programming language, it took 30 years to kind of get to the point where I can write a file and I don't care what operating system I'm using.
And what type of file
system. And when I started programming, that wasn't the case. I actually needed to know the file system that I'm using. Right. And so there are abstractions that did work, right? Like I'm a believer in abstractions as a. Yeah. I have to, Of course. But you're right. Eventually, there's an art to it. I feel like there's an art to it, and you can easily build crappy abstractions. It's like way easier.
And I've done this a lot of times. And I've proven this.
No, I think you're right, and I'm not suggesting that abstracting is not possible. I'm saying that you need to sit in the right spot. In these abstractions.
There's a very fine.
If you're too high, if you're too high, it doesn't work. If you're too low, it doesn't work. If you're too here, it doesn't work. You need to be in the right place. And
one of the things we decided, and we ran out of time. One of the things we decided, we're not going to abstract databases.
Yeah.
Well, we've seen people trying to abstract databases.
It's a shit show.
Yeah, it doesn't work that well. Because a lot of time in databases, people are dealing with the kind of, they need the thing below the abstraction in order to kind of really use the kind of the performance things of
Not even the performance, even the functionality. I feel like it's a very application. A database is a very, very intimate part of the application, and the way it works is really influences how your code is written.
Yeah, we can abstract a KV store. We can say this is a KV store and it's going to behave pretty much the same everywhere. We can do that, but we're not pretending to abstract something like that.
I'd argue I'm not even a true believer in that.
No, let's see the next PR from Mark. Any last questions? Anything you have to ask? You want to ask a lot? Anything, Massimo? You want to?
I would like to ask you, how do you see these generative AI fitting into this? Right, it feels like we woke up a morning, one of these last days, and it was like, oh my God, what's happening? Right. So now I have something that I can ask, build this infrastructure for me. Right, and it will spit like
we actually had
1,000 lines of confirmation.
Yeah, I actually had an interesting conversation about it today. I feel like at this point, and I don't, nobody really knows where this is going tomorrow, right? So it's very fast and it's changing, but I feel at this point, you wouldn't, and you can take ChatGPT because people understand how ChatGPT works. You wouldn't take ChatGPT and ask it to write a blog post in the language that you don't understand, right? Okay. You wouldn't take ChatGPT and ask it to write a blog post in Italian. Okay. Right? Because you're not going to be able to tell if the output makes sense, right? Like you're not going to publish something that ChatGPT wrote without understanding it. Okay. And so I feel like it's the same with this, dream of GPT building your infrastructure. That's not an abstraction. That's almost by definition a leaky abstraction, right? In a sense. And so if you don't understand the output, then you're not going to go and produce thousands of lines of CloudFormation and deploy them to AWS without understanding what they're doing. Now that could change. This technology is evolving really, really quickly, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see where it's going. I feel for Wing, the Wing angle, there are really a lot of interesting angles for Wing. I feel one of the interesting ones, and that's kind of like related to AutoGPT and these like kind of like iterative generative AI tools, is that Wing, because of this local simulation that Wing has, you can really quickly iterate and get to this. Like I think one of the key aspects of these, AutoGPT type solutions is that they're kind of like experimenting. And going and experimenting on the cloud, actually deploying stuff, getting things deployed, checking that they're working, that's very, very slow, very inefficient, very expensive, potentially hazardous to everybody. And so I feel like that could be an interesting angle for Wing, being able to like really quickly get feedback, about what's going on. And so if we're going to be able to see these generative AI tools helping write code, then these frameworks, these platforms that allow you to actually iterate locally and quickly are going to be instrumental, because otherwise, so
yes, I also like the what you pointed out in the first part of your discussion, because I usually say that I would rather, if I ask a question like this, like generate something for me, X, Y, Z, whatever that is, I would rather that on the other side I get it 50% right rather than 99% right, because figuring out that 1% is going to be a lot more difficult than filling the remaining 50% of it 50% right and 50%
totally
wrong.
Totally.
So I think that this is a big problem, right? You either trust it 100%, so whatever it says,
which becomes an abstraction, right? Like then it becomes a true abstraction, right?
Okay, now I see. Now I understand the abstraction part. Awesome.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting.
nice-
I mean, it goes back to like I had like this T-shirt when I created Progen. You're familiar with Progen? And so I had this T-shirt that someone gave me that
templates?
says "Templates are evil." And to me, we're still at this stage with GPT, right? Like when you're generating code for me,
Got it.
that's my code now. I need to own this, and that means that now I need to understand what's going on because, and if I didn't write it, if someone else had written it for me, let alone if it's this language model, I don't see this at this point. I'm still, I'm not sure that that's.
Yeah.
It's very sexy. It's very.
It's a great companion for writing code.
Yeah, and I feel like finding the right way to use it as a tool,
Right.
is crazy and amazing.
And also it helps you to learn the language. I see a lot of value that we could use. I mean, basically in a post ChatGPT world, Wing was founded in a
Post ChatGPT world is basically dystopian
world. Yeah,
it's like we're not gonna be here.
No, we're gonna be here, but we're gonna.
No one is going to be
Yeah,
here.
exactly. Hey, Massimo.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Thanks so much for coming. It was a pleasure.
No,
Really
thanks
interesting
for having me.
conversation. Thank you very much. It was
Thanks for all the
enlightening.
insights and your story. And we didn't even have time to chat about OS2, but maybe next time.
Have you heard about OS2?
Of course, I asked OS2 as my 16th birthday gift was like I wanted OS2 to get OS2. I think it was OS2 Warp. OS2, the operating system.
Really? OS2 Warp.
OS2 Warp. I remember getting like 30 floppy disks and
Really
installing them. Anyway, yeah.
I installed OS2 version 1.0. I think that it was 3 floppies or whatever. It got to 30 plus, and then they moved to CDs.
Yeah, and then the Microsoft bear hug basically killed the project, which was beautiful. I loved it. It was like really great engineering and UI was cool. I really liked the GUI and anyway. So we said we didn't talk about it, so I can't help it.
All right.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Hey,
and thank you everyone for watching us.
And thanks for staying up late for us. It's really appreciated.
Oh no, that's my wife. That's my life. I work very much with Seattle.
Okay.
So I tell my friends that I'm a baker because I work at night.
Bye, man. See you later.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Wow, what a fun discussion. What an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I told you it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it was enlightening. It's I'm going to watch it again. It was very smart. Thank you, man. It was a pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Thank you
Thank
again.
you for all the guests and thank you for the
Episode 9.
And we're gonna post some. We'll post Massimo blog post. If you're gonna send us, we're gonna post it also.
Okay. Yeah, we should.
Yeah. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye.